we're all familiar with Anacostia now and the Douglas House on the hill, now. But what was it like back then when Douglas lived in Anacostia?
When Douglas lived in Anacostia, it was very rural. It was really, Anacostia was Washington's first suburb. It was his first subdivision. And it was really placed for working class folks. And Douglas played a pivotal role in the neighborhood. The local streetcar line, Douglas actually was an investor in the streetcar line, and when he died, he actually still held stock in that streetcar company.
Well, you can just see he was so involved, like you mentioned, he was a U.S. Marshal. How did that come about? Because like you said, very unheard of. How did that happen?
Frederick Douglass was appointed Marshal of the district, and this was at that point a very, very prominent position. It was basically a step below cabinet level appointment. And on the condition that Frederick Douglass would be appointed Marshal, the Republicans in the Senate basically said, okay, we will allow for the removal of federal troops from the South. In 1877 is when the last federal troops were removed from South Carolina and Louisiana.
Wow. So it's amazing just to see his influence across America, but then also just being so involved in D.C., so as a U.S. Marshal, but then in addition, being on the board of trustees for Howard University, talking about that connection as well.
So Douglas being the most prominent black man in America at that time and being of such consequence, the board of trustees said we need Douglas to be on our board because of his fundraising ability, because of also he would be such a good example for all of our students. Douglas is not necessarily a founding father of the university because he was not on the founding board of trustees, but he was with that group. He was of that era.
Frederick Douglass was a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Washington. How important was that to him, religion in his life?
Religion and faith and Christianity was very important in Douglas's life. His church in Washington that he most frequently attended was the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church at 1518 M Street. Douglas donated ornamentation to the church. From 1886 until his death in 1895, Douglas frequently attended Sunday services there. There was a lecture series that Douglas was very involved in.
Let's talk about the day that he died. What was his plans for that day?
Well, Frederick Douglass, the day that he died was February 20th, 1895. Douglas was 78 years old. Douglas was known to use mimicry, so he got up, and Helen Pitts thought that he was mimicking something he had seen earlier in the day, and he collapsed and in the hallway, and Helen ran out to the porch and screamed for a doctor to come. A doctor came, and 20 minutes later, Frederick Douglass was pronounced dead. It's believed that I guess he died of heart failure or heart attack. And when Douglass died, there was just an outpouring of emotion and eulogies. And the eulogies did not just come from Black America, did not just come from the Black press. The New York Times, the Evening Star, all these papers gave lots of space in the papers to covering Douglas's funeral and praising how important Douglas was to his period of American history and how important he was to the men and women of his race.
So now we're actually entering into